Hey folks, welcome back to another video. You know, it wasn't long ago that no one really gave video much of a thought in the still photography world, but times have changed and people are now integrating videos more into their workflows, into social media. And so Sony has had to answer that need with a series of video cameras, starting with the FX30, going to the FX30, which we're reviewing today, and then the FX10 coming out soon. So I wanted to do a rundown first of the specifications of the FX30. We want to talk about the role of the FX30 in your workflow, close-ups of the FX30, how and why I think you should or should not buy one, in the conclusions. So I want to start off with the specifications. The sensor is a backlit illuminated CMOS 26 megapixel APS-C sensor, brand new APS-C sensor there. ISO is 100 to 32,000. Nothing really to talk about there so much, as that's what we're seeing in modern cameras. The image stabilization is interesting with the FX30. You have a 5-axis IBIS image stabilization for 5.5 stops of stabilization. But you also have gyro sensor data, which is stored in the camera. It doesn't stabilize it while you're shooting. But what it does do is it allows Catalyst, which is a video software available from Sony, to use that gyro information and stabilize the camera in post. Now, this is a great feature, but the downside to it is that you've got to crop with it, and it upscales to meet the 4K resolution, for example. The viewfinder is a 3-inch rear only, so there's really not a viewfinder per se. That is one of the things missing from the FX30 that a lot of people wished it had, especially those coming from the still photography arena. So there's not even a third-party or extra viewfinder that you can buy to put on the hot shoe, for example. It has a shutter speed on the still side from 30 seconds to 1/8,000th of a second. It has a myriad of video formats. There are so many formats that this camera supports. I cannot run down through them all. I will say that it has 1080p in the S, the HS. It has SI formats in 4K and in 1080p. It supports both H.264 and H.265 for that 10-bit video that's so sought after these days. There's over 30 different possibilities for this camera. I mean, can you believe that? When I went in here, it literally was mind-blowing to me to see how many different options that it had. I was overwhelmed, as primarily a still photographer that's moving into video. I was overwhelmed to see all these options. It has slow motion at 4K 120p. At 1080p, you can go to 240 frames per second for ultra slow-mo. However, there's a big caveat here, guys. One, you have to use the S&Q, slow and quick mode, for the 240. You also have to have the very expensive CF Type A cards, and that was a deal breaker for me on this one. For cards, it is recommended that you, and I found this out with my shooting as well, the SDXC290 V90 is what you should really have on the SD card side. You can get away with a V60. I do recommend the V90. For the really high-end 10-bit modes, for the 240, 1080p, slow-mo, you're going to need a Type A, CF Express Type A, I want to get this right, VFG 200 or better. That's going to set you back some money. You're talking hundreds of dollars just for one card. And that is my problem with the Type A card. And I really think Sony has made a mistake. What I would like to see Sony do, Sony, if you're watching this, just go ahead and just don't try to make a profit on those cards. Just sell them at cost, because it doesn't make any sense. You're a camera company. You're not an SD manufacturer. Sell those cards at cost, and let's get moving forward with this whole thing. Metering modes, you've got the classic metering modes: multi, center weighted, highlight weighted, average, spot, and partial. I tried both the highlight weighted and the multi, and I didn't see much of a difference. Maybe you will, or maybe you do, I don't know. I thought that I would just stick with multi like I do with every other scenario. The one thing you have to think about here with video, okay, and this is a good spec here to bring out as well. We haven't talked about the picture profiles. So it uses many of the picture profiles you're familiar with as videographers: S-Log2, S-Log3, but it also has S-Cinetone. And S-Cinetone is the profile that I use a lot, being a hybrid shooter. I think it gives you the best bang for your buck. It gives you something you can use out of camera almost right away, but it also has some latitude in the highlights and shadows. The S-Log3 is very difficult to use, and we'll see that later as I show you kind of, you know, what it looks like before and then what it looks like after it's been color graded. It has audio jacks for the 1/8 inch audio jacks for headphones and mic. So that's of course par for a video camera. I can't imagine a video camera that didn't have that. It has HDMI out. It supports wireless and Bluetooth. It connects remotely to your camera. As you can see right here, folks, I'm actually got this sitting off to the side and I'm watching myself. Isn't that interesting? Okay, so you can control your camera. It has USB-C. Priced new is $17.98 at the time of this recording. Used, you can get one for about $1,550 to $1,600. They're not coming down much, guys, in this whole deal. So I hate to say that, but you're probably better off buying new right now. Okay. Okay, so we're going to take a look at the FX30 close-up here. You can see I've got the articulating screen open here, and you can see that will rotate around. It will close like so. I like the fact that you can close it so there's no damage to the outside of it. But this comes in very handy when you are doing things like, you know, the camera's low and you're high and you need to be able to see it. I used this extensively when I was testing this. We'll see those videos later. Also want to show you, if it'll let me, I want to show you this screen right here. This is probably the best screen of the system, and I'll hopefully give you a little better video of this later. But the fact that you can touch it, right? Change your picture profile. You can go in here, change your shutter speed very simply. You can do all this right here on this little screen. I really like that. So that was a plus. Let's take a look at the outside of the camera now. So we're looking at the top here. We've got Cinemaline FX30 imprinted on there. Come to the front a little bit, we will see this interesting toggle right here. That is for zoom. That is for power zoom cameras that have that toggle. So that's a very welcome feature. I like that. You'll see programmable buttons here. We've got 3 here. We've got 1 down here on the front of the camera. Those you can program for just about anything that you want to. They have ISO marked, white balance, and iris, but that's just the default settings on those. You can change those to whatever. I love the huge record button on the top here. And actually, if I were to go into record mode here, we can see the tally lights. Look at all these really cool tally lights. As you turn it here, you can see that we are on camera, right? That we are recording. You can see the tally light also on the record button. And then if I flip it, you can see the record light on the back as well. That is very important. Those tally lights are so nice when you're doing, you know, videos with actual talent, but also if you are doing videos for like this, for vlogging and so forth. So that's also cool. Up here now, your joystick is up here now. and it moves just like all the other joysticks. I kind of like it up there, to be honest with you. It's right next to the shutter release. It's very easy to get to. I guess I would rather have it on the back, but I'm okay with it being there. Let's go to the back of the camera now. Hopefully I can show this without getting too crazy. Okay, so here you have some of the basic things that we're familiar with. You got the dial, you've got 4, which can be programmed. It's defaulted to deleting. You've got your playback button here, got focus magnification here, which is really nice. You got your function button for doing function display. By default, this can be set to anything, but by default it's peaking. It changes your display, which I would leave the display alone. Zebras over here, which yeah, okay, I'm good with that. Shutter speed, I would change that to something else, personally. If we rotate the camera to the back now, we can see that we have the battery compartment here. It takes the standard Z batteries, which is nice. We can see the fan here on the back. Note how we have this fan. I'll bring it up a little closer here maybe and you can see it. This camera has a fan. The FX30 has a fan to cool it while it's doing video, and that is crucial for video. And you can actually see it over here on the side as well. You can see that fan right there. Very crucial for doing video work. Anyone that's messed around with any hybrid cameras will notice that that is sorely missing. If we look here on the side, we can see that we have some doors here that are cool. So this is the HDMI out, and it uses the new door mechanism rather than the flippy mechanism that the A9 has and some of the newer cameras. Here we've got the HDMI, or the USB-C and the multi-port, which is common on all these cameras. And of course we have the headphone jack and the microphone input. Front-wise, if we look at this camera front on, there's not a whole lot to see on the front. Like I said, you've got this, this alternate record button or programmable button down here. You've got, of course, the alpha symbol and all that great coolness. We've got on the top again, I forgot to mention this, you've got your strap lugs here for putting a camera strap on. So very much like a Sony. The one thing that's interesting, and I can't really show it to you right here, but maybe I'll do some B-roll here. The menu is over here, and that's normal. But then you've got this mode button over here, which is kind of weird that we have this mode button. Essentially, it allows you to scroll through the menus over here. And I mean, I don't know if I really like that, but this is where you would select aperture priority, shutter priority, manual, camera, S&Q mode, which is useful for doing slow motion. You've got your memory 1 and memory 2 in here. Again, I'm not a huge fan of this setup at all, but I guess that's the way the cinema line is shaking out. So I'm going to power it down here with a power switch. Power switch is a little bit odd, but I do like the way it's made. Is there anything else I can show you? Of course, you've got your tripod socket down here on the bottom. And your serial number and so forth. So it's very much a normal Sony setup. Now, what I like about this is the form factor. Is if you really look at this camera, you're going to see a deep grip over here, and I really like that. It feels more like the newer A1s and so forth, and maybe even a little beefier. I feel like this is beefier than the A1, so I really like that. Really, you can't go wrong with this camera. I really liked it, but we'll now go back and take a look at the images that I made with this camera. Okay, let's talk about the videos and the photographs I made with the FX30. I had two main objectives here when I was testing the FX30. First, I wanted to look at how this camera handles the basics of videography. Can it handle my needs as kind of a hybrid shooter that's looking more at the video world? The second thing I wanted to try to understand was, is this going to be good for my hummingbird photography, my songbird photography, you know, birds in flight? Is the IAF going to work good on the video? All that stuff was important to me. Can it do 120p at 4K adequately? So that's really what we're looking at here in these test results. So the first video is at a place called Hanging Rock State Park, and it is Lower Cascades. Now, Lower Cascades is probably the best feature in the park, and it's a waterfall, and below it are a series of cascades. So as we look at this first video, this is of the cascades, not of the waterfall. And I really like what I'm seeing here. I like the slowness of the water. I could have gone slow-mo here, but I didn't. I just wanted to see what it would look like at 24p, you know, 1/30th of a second shutter speed on a 4K. So that's what I did here. I think it looks good. I did do some work in post in DaVinci Resolve by lightening up the right side over there a little bit of the image, and lightening up some of the rocks on the left side. These rocks in the foreground, that's as bright as they are. They're some kind of iron ore type rocks that we get here quite a bit. The next image is of Lower Cascades, and I like this shot too. I think it did good with the color. These are all S-Cinetone picture profiles, except for the last one I'm going to show you, which was S-Log. And I just like the color. I love the greens in this. I love the waterfall. It's very, you know, the pool beneath it. It's just very relaxing. I had a polarizer on my 24mm Rokinon lens. I thought it did a good job here. I think it turns into something around a 35mm focal length with the APS-C sensor. One thing to note here is the APS-C sensor. I like it. I like it for doing wildlife work, and there are times that I think it just looks good, and this is one of those where the crop actually helped me. So that's a good thing. Okay, the next photograph, actually it's a video. I keep wanting to say photograph because I'm primarily a still shooter. The next video is exactly what I wanted to see that it could do, and that's 4K 120p slow-mo. I thought it did an excellent job of slowing the hummingbird down enough to where we could actually see it, because they're so fast and furious that it's just difficult to even see them. This is the female. I have a couple also of the male that I think there's some. I think you can go out to YouTube and check those out if you're interested. I really liked the subject. I liked her cooperation. I like the colors in this. These are, I believe, Mandevilla flowers from Central America, which makes sense since this is a Central American bird. This is what I want the camera for, is this type of thing. I mean, yeah, the waterfalls are cool too, and the landscapes are cool, and, you know, raindrops hitting a mud puddle, that's all cool and everything. But I just want to see what this thing can do from a nature perspective, and it really didn't let me down, guys. I don't know, in this case, I don't know if it was using bird IAF. I almost suspect it was, because the sharpness was so good on this image. I'll put the full specs up here at the end of each video, of course, so you can see them. The next video is an important video. This is what you saw earlier, which is S-Log 3 before and after. The S-Log output is not for the faint of heart. The S-Log 3 is indeed washed out.
There's not a lot of color. It's very flat. It's very difficult to, I guess for the uninitiated especially, it's very difficult to process this image in post. You have to apply what's called a LUT. And a LUT is just simply a profile that's applied to that S-Log video clip that allows it to get a better color. You're still not done with it yet. It's kind of an intermediate step. Rec 709 kind of thing. There's a lot of other LUTs out there. There's LUTs specific to specific cameras. You can go out to Sony's websites and you can download LUTs that people have created to use. Now, a lot of times your standard LUTs are not going to be what you're interested in, because those LUTs, they give a cinematic look. They're not necessarily what you're going for. Like in this case, I did a lot more work after I applied the LUT, which you typically end up doing. So on the split screen, the image on the right is what I came up with for my color corrections. And I'm still learning, guys. I know I'm not perfect. But one of the things I wanted you to focus on here at the end of this clip, I'm going to pause it at the end here so you can see it. There's a perch. And on the left side, it's easily overexposed. I would say at least a stop and a half overexposed beyond what the exposure was for the S-Log. And because it was S-Log3, I was able to bring that back in DaVinci Resolve. I was able to bring that back into a somewhat normal looking piece of wood. And that's a difficult thing to do, especially if you're just using, the standard, MP4 output out of the camera. Not MP4 S-Log, but I'm drawing a blank on what it is right now. But it's the one you typically get out of almost every camera. It's kind of like a JPEG is to your in the photography world. There's not a lot you can do with that from a highlight and shadows kind of thing. The dynamic range is hard to deal with those type of outputs, and so that's why a lot of cinematographers use the S-Log or log. I think they just usually call it log. And this camera does well. It has all those in there. I mean, you can just have fun, So for the seasoned cinematographer, everything is there. And for the budding cinematographer, everything is there, right? Like I said, if you're budding, I recommend the S-Cinetone, which you saw previously to this. I do encourage you to learn S-Log3, which I'm trying, and other logs, which I'm trying to do myself, but there is a large learning curve to it. It's not simple. It requires a lot of horsepower on your computer, because what ends up happening is the more colors that you change, the more you dodge and burn and do crazy stuff like that to your videos, the more horsepower it needs to render and even to play back. So it's something to consider. The other thing is, if you're a budding videographer, and this is just free of charge, you need a lot of storage space. It's amazing how many terabytes get used up on good video. And I'm talking about even deleting the junk you don't want. I mean, just good finished video that you want to keep. And so I highly recommend that you get a lot of storage space and a lot of computer. So let's move on to the stills. Now, still photography is my bread and butter, okay? And so I was interested to see how the FX30 did from that perspective. Having that 26 megapixel sensor is exactly what the doctor ordered for still photographs, and I'll tell you why. Being a nature photographer, specializing in birds and mammals, I have found that it's better to have the reach of an APS-C camera. Now, some of the drawbacks of the APS-C, of course, more noise. It's hard to escape that to some degree, although this camera has done an amazing job, in my opinion, of dealing with the noise. So the first image here is the same scene you just saw on video of Lower Cascades, but done as a still. Same lens, the Rokinon 24mm 1.8 at f11 here. I think it did a fabulous job. I think you can bring out the color so much better, in my opinion, or faster. I don't know if better is the right word, but faster, and it's easier to bring out those colors with a raw file right out of a camera and as a still. So this is done at f11, of course, 24mm, 1/5 of a second at ISO 125. Okay, the next image. Now, this is an image that, frankly, I don't know how I got it. This is an extremely rare image, I will just say that. Getting both the male and the female of the nesting bluebirds is certainly luck, right? I mean, it is skill to get the image, but it's luck that it happened. Probably will end up in, it may end up in my top 10 this year, I don't know. What did I think of shooting it in this scenario? Well, first of all, I love the bird eye AF. I mean, it just locked right on. Not having a viewfinder, I was very worried about not being able to get a focus point on the eye of the bird. But with that bird eye AF, I never had to, guys. I never had to worry about it. So in this image, the interesting thing about this image, though, is I took 2 shots rapidly, and what I did was I did a focus stack on these, because otherwise the bird in the foreground would be out of focus. So you had to do just a 2-image focus stack on this. This was f6.3 with my 200-600 Sony, 588mm, ISO 500. Okay, the next image, another bluebird shot of the male of the mating pair. And what he's doing here is he is taking a break, but he's getting ready to head back to the nest with what appears to be some kind of larva that he's got in his mouth there, and I'm sure that tastes good to bluebirds, but anyway. 1/800th of a second, 485mm, f9.0. The next image. This one was another shocker. This was a northern mockingbird that had had enough of a squirrel that was nearby. And 5 seconds after I made this, he literally flew after that squirrel, picking at him. What they'll do, they're little buggers. What they'll do is they'll either get him with their talons, but what they typically will do will try to grab some hair off from him. And it just scare, basically they just scare the rodent, you know, into running. So he's very angry here. This reminds me of the video game Angry Birds. And I often wonder, you know, is that where he got the idea from? It probably is. This shot was f9, 600mm, 1/800th of a second at ISO 1600. So it's a good time to talk about ISO on this camera. This camera did very, very well with ISO. I was frankly quite surprised. I wouldn't go over 3200 ISO unless you had extremely good lighting. I thought that it did an amazing job at 1600 ISO. Very easy to clean up in post. I used Denoise AI on it, and it did a marvelous job. The next image is of the Cascades that we just saw in the videos, but this is a still image of it. And this actually is a long exposure with the polarizer on and the water. So they're talking about a 15-second exposure, f22. F22 on this lens will introduce diffraction, and you'll especially see that with APS-C cameras, so you'll have to sharpen them up in post if you do that. So that's pretty much all I had for the videos and the images. I hope that you enjoyed this series. I hope you enjoyed this FX30 review. My reviews tend to be a little longer than most people's, but they tend to be more real world. What I want to do is I want to show you exactly what I did, exactly why I wanted to test this camera, and how I tested it. I don't go into like the minutia as far as like, oh, here's what this image looks at 100%, and here's what it looks like after post, and here's what I mean. Because to me, that's interesting, and I do study some of that stuff. But to me, it's all about the final product. I don't really care how you got there. I honestly don't. I don't care how you got there. And my mantra is a good photograph is a good photograph. Okay? And what I mean by that is, I don't care how you got here. It's still a great photograph. You could take it at the zoo. You could take it in Alaska. Now, is Alaska more rewarding? Absolutely. Alaska is much more rewarding than going to the zoo. But a great image is a great image. A great video is a great video. Right? So I wanted to kind of leave you with that in this segment. Anyway, that's all I had for this. Let's move on to the conclusion.
Okay, let's talk about the pros and cons of the FX30. First of all, I love the fact that it has 4K 120p slow motion. I love the fact that it has 1080p 240 frames per second. Unfortunately, Sony, I was unable to use that feature because it requires the new CF Type A card, which costs hundreds of dollars. Come on, Sony. I love the fact that it has a new 26 megapixel sensor. That sensor is rumored to be in the new A6700. I'm looking forward to seeing that camera and testing that camera. I really want to do that one. That's going to be exciting. I like the fact that it has S-Cinetone. S-Cinetone, as we already talked about, is my go-to in these cameras to produce better quality imagery coming out of the camera, but still have some latitude in the highlights and shadows. Shooting with S-Log3 can be very annoying, frustrating, trying to color grade that in post. You need fast computers, you need fast graphics cards, and you need a lot of patience. And so even though there are LUTs out there that you can use, it's still tough. By the way, this camera, another pro, it supports a LUT that can be loaded into the camera, even custom LUTs that you create. And you can see that on your viewfinder. You can kind of see what it's going to look like after the initial color grading, which is very cool. It also tags the image with it, so it embeds it into the MP4 file, so it can later be read by applications like Catalyst, any video editing software that you might have, Adobe Premiere Pro. These could all take advantage of that since it's already in there. I love the fact that it has bird eye AF, and we're going to see that in the segment coming up. By the way, every video, every segment I've shot with this, except the tabletop segment, is using the FX30. Right now I'm actually using the FX30. I love the great screen articulation. I love being able to, right now as I'm looking at this camera, I can look off to the right here and I can see myself, I can see how I'm framed, I can see the exposure, whether my eyes are in focus, all that kind of stuff. I'm using the IAF right now for this video. I love the fact it has tally lights. The tally lights are very cool. If you're doing things like vlogging, or if you have talent in front of you that you're doing, say you're doing a model, or you're doing a model like at a waterfall or something like that, they know when that light is on that you're recording, and they know it's time for them to get in the model mode, for example. So I love that. I wish all cameras had that, or at least had that feature to turn it on. You know, so many of our cameras that are what they call hybrid cameras just don't have these features. I like the record button. It's large, it's easy to find, it has the red ring around it when you're recording. I like the audible chimes when you hit record and when you end record. Very, very cool stuff from Sony. I like the zoom rocker switch, although I really don't have anything to use it with. It's made for the cinema lenses that has the power zooms and so forth. That could be very handy, especially for those that are doing, concerts, weddings, things like that, where you're going to need to do that subtle zoom in, zoom out. cinema work where you're doing, you know, those pullouts and so forth. Very, very handy for the cinema photographer. I like the fact it has touch to focus. You can just touch anywhere on the screen in the back and it will focus on that area and hold it. I like that it has a pinch zoom. You can actually hit the playback button and you can zoom in and zoom out by using your fingers. So just like a cell phone, very cool. I love the price. The price on this camera is right. At $1,800, you just can't go wrong with it. I mean, it really is a great buy out there. And if you're looking for something that can take you into the videography world, you're looking for something like that, it's going to be perfect for you. So what about the cons? Okay, I think you pretty much already know what I'm going to say here. I don't like the fact that you need a CF Express Type A card for doing certain video options like 240p slow-mo when I can do that on my cell phone. I should be able to do that without a special card, Sony. I like that I don't like that the viewfinder, they don't even have a separate viewfinder that you can purchase. Like, why do they not just have a viewfinder that you can attach to the hot shoe if you want to for certain types of shoots? Not everybody is going to want to sit back away from their camera and pan, you know, doing the pan and tilts and stuff like that. I mean, sometimes that's what you want, but other times you don't want that. Sometimes you want to be able to look through that viewfinder and really, really scrutinize the scene, and you can't do it. I would love to see a pop-on viewfinder on top of that FX30. Why is there logging mode? This is something that bothers me. Inside here, when you use S-Log3, for example, you have to turn on what's called logging mode, and then you can have some selections. Why, if I select picture profile for S-Log, it should automatically turn on logging mode. I mean, whether I select a different, you know, sub menu in that is up to me. Why is that It's absolutely stupid. And then when you go back to, let's say you switch back to Cinetone, right? Now it gives you a dumb error message. You're in logging mode. Well, why didn't you switch logging mode off when I go to S-Cinetone? That makes no sense whatsoever. It's a solid camera. It does have some cons, but there's not a lot of cons. So in conclusion, who in the world is this camera for? Like, if you're a stills only photographer, no, this thing can do some still photography, but it's not amazing at still photography. Okay, it only has single shot mode on stills. You can't do burst mode. It's not designed for that. But if you're in a pinch and you need to make photographs, some amazing photos in here, as you've already seen. It's a good B-roll camera for those that have the FX3. You're familiar with all the controls of the FX3, which is exactly the same pretty much as the FX30. You can easily switch back and forth. It's an inexpensive B-roll option, or a second camera option, or a third camera option. I definitely could see this. The fact that you can shoot so long with this, with a fan and so forth, it's just a great option for professional videographers. I like it for wildlife photography, as you've already seen. I think it checks off the boxes for me that the hybrid cameras really don't do unless you're shooting with like an A1 or something. You know, my A7R III, you know, my A9, they make some great video, but they don't have all the options that this camera has. It's a solid camera for vlogging. I can definitely see vloggers taking advantage of this camera. The fact that it's so easy to use, the fact that you have the articulating viewfinder, the fact that you don't have to just use it for vlogging. You can take it out and do wildlife and do nature and do portrait shooting / cinematography / cinema work. I mean, it's just a kind of a do-it-all video camera, in my opinion. I see this also as a stepping stone for those that want to go from the stills world to the video world and back. The truth of the matter is, our hybrid cameras work but being able to have this for video only, I mean, that's hard to beat. The features that it has, all of those 30, at least 30 different combinations of shutter speeds, 8, 10-bit, all different kinds of frames per second are available. It's just a win in the area of videography. And finally, I see this as the perfect camera for those that are on a budget. I mean, if you have been looking at the FX3 and you just can't swing the cost, or you're looking at the A7S series and you just can't afford the cost, this is the right camera for you. It does everything they do except for the viewfinder, and I just feel like you can't go wrong. So I hope you enjoyed this video. It's the FX30 is a camera I've been looking at for some time, and I've really wanted to do a review. I hope you enjoyed the review, and stay tuned. We're going to have more reviews coming.